Welcome to Get Your Bell Rung Pro Wrestling Podcast. Man, do I have a guest for us tonight? A gentleman who went through some hard times when he was younger, overcame those hard times, found success. We'll be talking about all of that. A gentleman who actually has a match coming up on July 12th with SICW. No, none other than Volatile Curtis Wylde. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, brother. I'm good. Thanks for having me on the show. Thanks for, spreading the word and getting some awareness out there for July 12th when Glen Williams and I go one-on-one in Collinsville, Illinois for the SICW Central States Championship. And I become one of the only, there's only been one, but I become the second Grand Slam winner in SICW history.
That would be very cool. Now, normally when I do the podcast, I normally start off about the person behind the character. I don't want to do that tonight because you have a match coming up. I want you to. I want to start off with you telling me about this match, telling me about the history between you and the gentleman that you will be facing for the title.
Well, a little bit of the history with Glenn Williams was I was either his first match or one of his first matches, and the kid's come a long way since then. He's been in the business about 3-4 years now, I guess, and he's been making some waves in SICW. And as you know, SICW is the place to be in the Midwest, and one of the premier places to be in independent wrestling in the United States. And he's been making some waves, so he's kind of gotten on my radar before all of this, but recently, in the last 6 months or so, he found the opportunity to cut my tag team partner, the Irish luchador Billy McNeil's hair. That made things very personal because Billy McNeil and myself have been the tag team champions for like 320 days or something like that. It's been a
Wow.
while. We've had quite the run, me and Billy McNeil, and we still haven't locked down a name. We're either the unusual suspects or FAFO sometimes because he's FA and I'm find out. But the thing with Glenn Williams is that he weaseled his way into another situation where he cut my hair,
Mm.
and that was about a 3.5 year grow, man. So when you cut another man's hair, things get personal. And the championship aside, Glenn Williams has got an ass whipping coming. Yeah, I excuse my language. I don't know exactly your
You're
ratings
good.
on your podcast, but Glenn
I
Williams has
don't.
an ass whooping coming. He's going to lock horns with the Lion of the Lou, the Wolf of West County, the Spark of Forest Park, and he's going to find out what it's like to step on through to the wild side. July 12th, Glenn Williams, you better shine that belt up real nice because it's coming home to the wild side.
Now, Curtis, I have to ask you, and I mean no disrespect when I ask you this question, but Glenn Williams, he looks like a pretty big young stud, if you will. You've been doing this for a long time. You're kind of, you're not a spring chicken anymore.
Says
Do
who,
you,
KG?
hey man,
Says who?
I'm all about truth and facts, man. Do you think you really have it to be
Man,
for the title?
I've been a tag team champion for well over 300 days. I have held the Bruiser Brody Memorial Battle Royal Cup in SICW for one solid year. I am a former classic wrestling champion in SICW. I've won every prize except the one that Glenn Williams has. And I don't think that there's too much that's going to stand in between me and taking that gold and becoming the second Grand Slam winner in SICW history. So Glenn can, look intimidating and all that good stuff. But the fact of the matter is, I look at him, I see Mr. Potato Head. I see somebody growing a rat from their chin. You know what I mean? I see a freshman or a sophomore kid trying to come at the senior. You know what I'm saying to you? I see somebody who doesn't have the experience. I see somebody who doesn't have the dedication and the drive that Curtis Wylde has that's going to step in the ring with a big shark. He's going to go into the deep end. He's going to get eaten up. And that's all there is to it. July 12th, Glenn Williams and everybody else is going to find out.
You know what, Curtis? I have faith in you that you can do this, and I tell you why. I don't even think this is the hardest battle you've ever had to overcome in your life. We're gonna go way back to whenever you were a child. You grew up single mom. You guys didn't have a whole lot of money. You had to go through some tough times. Tell me about this. Tell me about that battle of being impoverished as a kid. And did that have anything to do with you turning to professional wrestling as a child?
I think so, man. I mean, we were poor growing up. I had, food in my belly, enough to be the fat kid in every new school that I went to. And we moved a lot. I went to a whole lot of different schools, and every one of those schools, there was a new bully, and with every bully, I had a new fight. And sometimes you gotta bully a bully in order to make your point. But the thing is trials and tribulations and the difficulties. Tough times make you tougher. So everything that I went through as a kid and all the hard times made me a harder person, and it made me somebody who knew that I could only rely on myself, because that's all that me and mom had for a long time. So it gives you a sense of reliance that can't be bought, can't be given, can't be bred. Really, it just difficulties happen, and you've got to figure out what path you want to take from those difficulties. I could be somebody who has an alcohol problem, who's in and out of jail right now. But I went a different path. Pro wrestling was that path, and pro wrestling probably saved my life a number of times by having purpose. Um, so I didn't really realize we were going to get this deep, but I dig it, man. I dig it. But
Absolutely, man. I look. I get compliments for being different in the sense of I like to get to know the person, the man or the woman. You are a professional wrestler. You're a damn good professional wrestler,
thank you.
but at the same time, professional wrestling doesn't make you. You make professional wrestling, if that makes sense. So I want to get to know the man that that was able to be that tag team, hold those titles for 300 in something days. What got you to
Still a
that
current
point?
champion. Still a current champion. When
Yeah.
I beat Glen Williams July 12th, I'm going to be a double champion and a Grand
Wow,
Slam winner.
that's incredible. 100% incredible. Now, did you, as a child, were you a big pro wrestling fan? And if so, did you use that kind of as an escape away from the reality of not having a lot of money and being bullied at times?
Yeah, not having a lot of money, being bullied at times, not having a lot of friends.
Right.
And mom had to work a lot. And in order to have any kind of social life, she sometimes, had to go out or wanted to go out, and that's completely understandable. And so I had to entertain myself a lot. And how I did that was I would find wrestling on TV, and I would take action figures on my grandmother's coffee table, and I would play with these action figures. Except even at 5 or 6 years old, I wasn't playing with action figures. I was making matches. I was a matchmaker, so I would have my little guys, and they would be my cruiserweights, and then I would have a middleweight type. Pairing, and then I'd have a tag team match, and then the heavyweight match with my action figures, and I would have this all laid out. I would have my card built right next to me. But that's just one little thing. One of
Right.
the other things is living in St. Louis. I had a whole lot of wrestling on TV. Pro wrestling. St. Louis is a pro wrestling town,
Yep.
and pro wrestling gets piped into our TVs, even when we only had three stations. Wrestling at the Chase reruns were a thing for a long time, and then WWE made it into town. We had World Class Championship Wrestling, where I got to see the Von Erichs, and I got to see, the Freebirds, and uh, really early on, people like Michael P.S.A.'s stood out to me. And then 5 or 6 years old, I'm wrestling pillows in my grandmother's living room. We were staying with my grandmother from time to time. I'm wrestling pillows in my living room, but it wasn't just wrestling around with the pillows. It was actually having matches. I had a recorder on a shelf, and I would record my matches like verbally. I had my own entrance music from a different music player. Um, Seriously,
That's
5 or 6 years
awesome.
old. 5 or 6 years old. I
That's
gave
awesome.
myself interviews. I interviewed myself. I was the California kid, Curtis Wells, from Curtis Wild now, but from St. Louis, Missouri, the California kid. Um, so it was all fun and games until the coffee tables get broken and things like that.
Right.
But yeah, it was the first thing that really started setting the hook. But then when my mom met a man who would become my stepdad, my dad figure, my father figure,
Right.
um, yeah, I had about 8, 9 years old. And about 8, we moved down to Horn Lake, Mississippi, and we were about
Oh,
20 minutes
wow.
away from Memphis, Tennessee,
Hmm.
Mid South Coliseum, Mid South Bear. I was able to catch wrestling at those places on a regular basis, and they had the USWA TV tapings. And if you sent in your self-addressed stamped envelope, you could get free tickets to the TV tapings, and I did that as often as I possibly could. And would have my mom or my cousin that lived with us at the time take us to the TV tapings, and that really bit me, man. There were times that we showed up late, and Jeff Jarrett were letting people in the door. Um, I have a vague memory, and I can't. Everything's getting hazy about that time, honestly. But I have a vague memory of getting to the venue late, and Jerry Lawler and Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert spilling out of the building fighting, and then Jerry Lawler getting hit with a car by Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. And that seems like something that it's like, no, you can't. You were in the parking lot when that happened. Um, but all the videos that I've seen, I have a very different angle of it in my memory. And I remember that it happened quickly, and then we turned to the right, and Jeff Jarrett was opening doors trying to get fans to come back in. And uh, it was just a really wild memory to think that, I was in that place at that time, right place, right time. And that's a whole lot of what wrestling has been is
Right.
right place, right
Okay.
time. But in Memphis, the first wrestling ring that I was in was a USWA ring at the Mid-South Fair. Some kids were able to get into the ring after the matches, and I was one of those kids. So
That's awesome.
it,
So,
yeah, never really got away from it.
Pro Wrestler 91 says, I'm here. Is this the gentleman that you're going to be going against? Because this guy looks like he has hair. I know Glenn.
Does he look like Mr. Potato Head?
No, he doesn't. So, well, Pro Wrestler 91, I'm here. Why don't you stick around? I appreciate you
Hmm.
joining on the podcast.
Do you remember Yahoo Serious, that guy that played I think Young Einstein? You remember that guy? He had the red
Yep.
hair that went straight up. It was all crazy. Like, now
Yeah.
imagine that guy's hair on a man's chin. That's what Glen Williams looks like. It's like
Dude,
Carrot
that's
Top
awesome.
in the upside down.
Oh, that's awesome. I want to go back a little bit to your childhood again because you mentioned your dad. I was going to bring him up. Things really turned around for you once your mom met the person who would become your father in a few ways because your family instantly grew from
Yeah.
a small family to a large family. Uh, how did that affect you as a child that was just used to being you and your mom?
Man, you did a lot of research. Well done, sir. Well done. Just to speak on that and expound on what you just mentioned, when my mom married my stepdad, he had 3 children. He had a brother who was older than me, or a son who was older than me, who became my brother, and a sister who was older than me, um, and a daughter who was younger. So he had 3 children, and I ended up being one of 2 middle kids. So I had a little bit of that middle
Right.
kid syndrome, but I also had an introduction of new friends that I never had in close proximity. And I guess I did have that before because I had a best friend.
Mhm.
Before I ever moved to Horn Lake, I had a best friend named Mike. And my parents eventually went on to adopt him, and he became my
Oh,
brother.
wow.
So my best friend became my brother in an adoption, and I had three siblings from a marriage, and then they got together. And when I was about 13 years old, they had my youngest sister. So yeah, our family grew over time, man. But for the first, 8 or 9 years, I was an only child, and it was tumultuous. And eventually, it came into a family scenario where it was a mixed family, but it was a
Right,
family
right.
that I never
And,
had,
and
Or
would it be safe to say that although it was just you and your mom, though, even though you may not have had a lot of money, at the same time, it sounds like though you might have been a happy kid because your mom loved you, obviously,
yeah,
and
man, we were.
sometimes that overcomes not having a lot of money. You're fortunate enough for her to be the man that took you in as well. You got some siblings. Uh, so you grew up in a very loving family, which
Yeah,
is
man.
probably
When you don't know what you don't have, you don't miss
right,
what you don't have.
right,
So if you're eating a lot of beans and cornbread, you don't realize that other people might be eating steak. You don't miss what you don't have, you know.
right,
Um,
right,
and I felt like we were getting by to the best of our ability. I never felt like I didn't have what I needed. We weren't that dirt poor,
right,
but
right.
we were struggling. We were a struggling family, single mom, and we got by the best we could. But like I said, every new school had a bully, and I always had to prove myself, and I had to fight at every new school that I went to, and so wrestling was kind of a natural progression. And even
Right,
when I got into wrestling, I had an attitude problem. I had a problem with authority. And the wrestling that I got was kind of drill instructor style
right,
from Powerhouse Championship Wrestling in Spring Valley, Illinois. And if you missed a move or if you didn't do something the way that they told you to, they were going to jump in your face and they were going to drill instruct you, and there was spittle coming out of their mouth. And you know the guys,
right, right.
But at the
You came from
time,
that era.
yeah, but at the time, I needed that. I would
Right.
have washed out if I would have probably just walked away from it if I had kid gloves like some of these guys do now, just
Yeah.
because it wouldn't have been enough of a challenge, you
Right.
know.
Right.
And I needed that challenge at that time, or needed the challenge that I had structured in my mind that pro wrestling was, because I
Mhm.
had always heard about the barrier to entry, that it was never easy to get into, and I found that out the hard way,
Yeah.
and
Now,
it's not easy.
right
It's
now,
not
did
easy.
any of your new siblings were they professional wrestling fans?
No, not really. Some of them kind of followed with me,
Right.
but they had other things going on. My brother went into the military. He spent a decade in the Marine Corps, uh, and ended up being a staff sergeant. But and both of my sisters are now happily married to great guys, and have small but growing. Well, one of them has a much larger family now because he had quite a few children, and they melded their families. So, but she's
Right.
got two. My other sister has two, and my brother's got a decent sized family up in upstate New York, and my wife and I have two. We've got a 3-year old that's about to be 4 in September, and we've got a 13-year-old who thinks that they're 30. Um, but that's Phoenix, and we got Griffin. So we did our best to give our kids cool names. We got Phoenix and Griffin.
Awesome. Now, how old were you when you decided, you know what, I'm going to give this professional wrestling thing a try? And
Six.
when you came up with that decision, that's what you wanted to do.
I was
What was the
six.
you were six? Wow. Now,
Yeah.
but what was the reaction to your family once they seen you actually go for it? Because look, 6-year-old kids, I said I was gonna be a professional wrestler whenever I was 6 years old. Some of us, that's not our calling. That obviously was your calling. Um, but once you got to the age that your family seeing that shit, this guy, he's actually going for it. What was their reaction? Did you have a lot of support? Did they try to talk you out of it?
Well, they never talked me out of it. I had a lot of support from my mom and stepdad early on, until I won my first heavyweight title. And then they're like, "All right, you achieved it," or they I don't know. Maybe they thought, "Oh, okay, we finally believe you.
Right.
You know, and they were like, all right, you're doing that thing, so you go do your thing. But um, otherwise, my wife has been really my biggest cheerleader, man, because we met back in
That's awesome.
2003, 2004, and she's been by my side and the whole wrestling game the entire time. You know, and she trained to wrestle, but before that, she was my manager, and after. She decided not to pursue wrestling the way that I did. She's still my manager, and she's my Miss Elizabeth, and she's always my biggest supporter. You know, but my family never really, other than my mom and stepdad, they never really picked it up or came out, for that. And then maybe they follow from afar. I don't know. Maybe they'll
Right.
see this interview. Maybe they'll see this interview and come to the show July 12th and watch me take the Central States Championship from Glen Williams.
That'd be awesome. So 6 years old, you want to be a professional wrestler. You become old enough to actually go for it. How old were you whenever you went to a wrestling? Did you go to wrestling school? You
Well,
said
I
that.
did. Absolutely. You don't get into this without going
Right.
to, well, you
Right.
shouldn't get into this
Right.
without going to a wrestling school. First wrestling school I went to was Windy City Pro Wrestling, and I didn't actually sign up because it was too expensive at the time. But that was the first place that I took a bump. I had a buddy who was the Rude Dog Donnie Farrell. Do you remember an A&E documentary on the WCW power plant?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There was a bald guy in that kind of looked like a shorter, smaller version of Stone Cold, and his name was Donnie Farrell. He was a rude
Okay.
dog, Donnie Farrell, and he lived in my town, Danville, Illinois, and he trained at San Vicero School for a period of time. And he snuck me in one night and let me take a bump when nobody else was around. But that was short lived because I couldn't afford San Vicero School. It was like 3 grand or 5 grand, something like that. I just didn't have that kind of funds. But Tim Lyle's Powerhouse Championship Wrestling in Spring Valley, Illinois was more affordable and took a payment plan that I could swing. There were a couple guys in my town that were going up there already to that particular school, the Phoenix Twins, who wrestled for Randy Ricci for a period of time. And I think they wrestled for Burt Prentice also. But they really kind of started to take off for a period of time, the Phoenix Twins, and we were the only ones that made it through that camp that I recall ever really going on to do much. Now, if you talk to Tim Lyle at that time, then CM Punk trained there, and Colt Cabana trained there, and all these guys got their start with Tim, But I don't want to speak ill of the guy,
Right.
rest in peace.
Right.
He's
Right.
passed away since, but. Uh, yeah, there was a lot of bullshit in wrestling, and there still is.
Still is right now. And I ask this question to every single person that's on my podcast because for some reason it fascinates me. Um, Obviously, when you do a bump, you're trained how to take that bump, but it still hurts. You still bruise until you get those calluses, and even then, it still hurts, right? Uh, was there a point because of just how physical professional wrestling is? And yes, people, professional wrestling is extremely physical. Did you get? Did you ever get to the point that you doubted yourself or you didn't want to move on because of how physical it was within the training?
No, no, the training for me was just a means to an end. Like I just needed to get through the training so I could start getting on shows and so I could start really plying my trade.
Right.
That was my introduction as far as I was concerned, and I still had a date to go on. You know.
Right, right. Now let's talk about. Oh, by the way, you mentioned Heart Lake, Mississippi, which is funny. I'm originally from Louisiana, and every
All
other
right.
Thursday for a while, I would stay in Heart Lake, Mississippi, because I would go to Memphis because Thursday nights were bike night on Bale Street, and I was there a lot. But what's cool is when we finally got cable, must have been around 13 or 14 years old, I was actually able to start watching Memphis wrestling, Jerry the King Lawler, as well as my Mid South. I never really got into WWF at the time, wasn't my thing. I grew up, the wrestling down south, much different than what was going on in New York. So my question is this: was there someone WWF, Memphis, or whatever promotion you watched that was a someone that you really looked up to that was even kind of a mentor per se?
Jerry the King Lawler, bro. Jerry the King Lawler, and he was a mentor from afar in the way that I implement his stylings fairly often in certain respects, and of course I put my own spin on things and make it Curtis Wild. But yeah. As far as Jerry Lawler's and I'll just say it, his storytelling, his psychology, how he does what he does, when he does what he does. Very, very studied on his work. And he was the king of Memphis when I was there, man. He was literally probably, and he did run for mayor later, but he probably should have ran for mayor when I was there because he probably could have won.
Right.
I mean, he was a huge deal. So, and to be there, and I actually went swimming with him one time. We went to the local swimming park, and they advertised on the radio, "Hey, come down to the swimming park and like a Raging Rivers and meet Jerry Lawler, swim with Jerry Lawler." And so I did. I had my parents take me down there, and it ended up being me and Jerry Lawler walking in front of about 20 different kids who were walking about 5 feet behind us. Kind of seemed like it was a dad-son day. We raced down the Geronimo. I think he waited because he let me win. And physics dictate that I shouldn't have won. He outweighed me. He outweighed me. The science doesn't add up. Math's not mathing. But and then he let me wear his crown. I was the only kid he let wear his crown because I kind of took it and put it on. I kind of took it and put it on, and after that, he's like, "No, I don't want all these kids wearing my crown."
Right.
And the USWA belt, formerly the AWA belt,
Yep.
I was able to hold that. Then that still to this day is my single favorite belt. When this is all said and done, I'll probably get a replica of that because I'll obviously never have an opportunity to win it. So
Right. Right.
that's
Now,
going to be one of the things that I don't have many things like that, keepsakes or
right.
collectibles, but that's one of the things I've had on my mind for quite some time is getting that belt as a, you know, just a trophy. Even though I never won it, it's a trophy that hooked me into this
Right.
business when Jerry Lawler had it. Um,
Right.
that's what I viewed as the world heavyweight champion, not so much the WWE.
Right.
Uh, and the NWA, I did view as the world heavyweight champion, but I saw it as two world heavyweight champions. I saw it as the NWA world heavyweight champion and the world heavyweight champion that was in my local area, the USWA heavyweight
Right.
champion, the unified, universal heavyweight champion, whatever he was calling it at that
Right.
time. And WWF was always just the WWF heavyweight
Right.
championship to me.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so
So
yeah.
let me ask you this: how long were you in training before you actually had your first match of your very first promotion? And what promotion was it? And what name were you
Well,
using?
my very first promotion was my home promotion at the time, Powerhouse Championship Wrestling. So that's where I had my first matches, and I was in training. I think about 6 months before they first started trying to try me out doing stuff, and some of that stuff was just do a gimmick or just be a body out there for this particular thing. But my first match was in December of '99, and it was a 2-on-1 with a guy named Bane. Who has passed away, but he was about 500 pounds and he was about 5'7".
Wow.
He was a huge dude, right? And it was a handicap match with me and another kid who was training at the time, but not in any way ready. And I probably wasn't ready either, but I was a little more experienced and could sell and things like that. Excuse my non kayfabe reference there, but it was a learning experience to say the least. He really just threw a bunch of forearms at us, beat us down, stacked us up, and that was the match. But then it went on, and in that promotion, I won my first championship. I won my first my only light heavyweight championship from Jimmy Jacobs at the time. He was the big bully. but he was very early in his career. Had a little bit more experience than I had, but he was still green. We were still pretty new to it. Um, and then I went on and went to, and eventually things don't work out and ties were severed with Powerhouse Championship Wrestling, and I went to a promotion that came out of some of the previous guys from there, who hadn't been with them, who had severed ties previously to me, and I went up there. That was Wicked Wrestling Alliance, and I started as just kind of a we'll see how you get, we'll see how you do, we'll see how the fans take to you, and I ended up connecting with the fans pretty instantly, and I was one of their biggest good guys there, and the fans took to me, and it was a fairly quick rise to my first heavyweight championship there. And then I was a heavyweight champion there for a period of time and moved on. And most places that I went, I was always, able to make a connection with the crowd enough for promoters to see that I was somebody they could get behind. So,
Right now, have you been during your career, 26 years now? Have you been a heel more times than a baby face, or a baby face more times than a heel? And which do you prefer, baby face or heel?
I've been I prefer hero or villain, but I prefer or have been more of a hero for a majority of my career than a villain. But uh, I was a villain in Indiana to the point where the crowd hated me so much they would try to jump the rail and fight me. They had to have their
Wow.
security force walk me to the ring and back.
Congratulations, because
Like
that's when
Shane
you know.
Douglas.
Yeah, man, look,
uh,
that's when you know that you are doing the best possible job that you could be doing when you have people hating you. So it says a
If you're
lot
the
about
villain,
you.
if you're the villain, I mean, you've got to have no redeeming qualities. A good villain, but a good villain believes that he's right.
Right.
You look at Lex Luthor, and you look at any of the great villains over history, and they always thought that they were right. They always thought that what they were doing was for the best. So yeah, I just believed that when I was in that character, when I was doing that. And so it made that a whole lot easier. It was very natural. But generally, I'm a friendly guy, so the being a hero portion kind of connects a little better. And when I was a villain, I was dastardly. I was a demonic plague upon SICW for almost 7 straight years. And in those 7 straight years, I never took a picture with a fan. I never signed an autograph. What I mean by no redeeming qualities is no redeeming qualities.
Right. Now, have you been mostly a singles wrestler of your career?
My whole
Or
career,
did
brother. My whole
wow.
career. And I've done tag matches over my career, but as far as being a tag team wrestler, um, eh, me and Billy McNeil, um, and we would tag periodically, and we were usually on the winning side of things. But when we came together and the tag team titles were on the line against the LA Hustlers, man, we pulled it together and we pulled it off. And over 320 days later, I believe I'll have to look at my calendar, but we won it August 3rd, 2024. So whatever that math is, man, we're almost a month
Right.
away from a full year. Um, but
Now,
but
talk to me
that
about this.
realized that made me realize that there's some life to a tag team division, because
Right.
yeah, you don't think of yourself as a tag team guy when you're a singles wrestler all the time, but then when you find a good partner like the Irish Luchador Billy McNeil, and you win the tag team championships, you realize that tag team wrestling might be something that you're pretty decent at too.
Right. And that's what I wanted to ask you. So here you are, a successful, may I add, singles wrestler. Who came up to you and said, "Hey, I want you to try this tag team thing"? And how did you feel about it initially?
Bro, I show up, I do what I'm asked. So I showed up for my booking. That was my booking. And we did what we needed to do to come out on top and get that W. Take us to the pay window, daddy.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, were you familiar with your partner? Did it take time to get this
Yeah.
chemistry between you
Well,
two?
me and Billy McNeil had teamed a number of times before that, but never became a tag team. It wasn't until that night when they put us together with the odds stacked against us and a prize in front of us that we both wanted, and we both would not be denied to get. That was when we became a tag team. And it's been a fun ride, man. Billy's a fun dude. I don't know if you've done an interview with him or seen anything with. You should
I'm
get
not
Billy
yet.
on. He's a little wacky. He's a
Absolutely.
little fun.
I love wacky man.
I mean,
What
I
is the
do
name of?
cardio. I do
Uh,
cardio. He chases squirrels for cardio. You feel me?
what is the name of your tag team?
Like I said earlier, we haven't uh,
Came up with a name?
locked
Nothing.
locked down a name, man. We're Volatile Curtis Wylde. We're Irish Luchador
Right.
Billy McNeil, and we're the SICW Tag Team Champions. Now, I have made a few posters that have names on them, but we haven't officially been introduced with any tag team naming. But I call us the unusual suspects sometimes, because Billy liked the usual suspects, and I was like, but bro, we're unusual. So
Right.
that we
Right.
went with that, and then I personally now SICW is a very family focused and family friendly event. But I'm a little edgy. I've always been a little edgy. I'm the guy that might fight Dr. D. David Schultz in front of Barbara Goodish, the widow of
Yep.
Bruiser Brody, because they're not willing to give me the Bruiser Brody Memorial Cup. I've always been somebody who's a little edgy. So my finisher is the WTF, Wild's Twisting Finale. That's family friendly, right?
Right.
Wild's
Right.
Twisting Finale,
I like that.
and a name that I like for our tag team that we've never really pulled the trigger on, but it's lovingly mentioned, is FAFO. Everybody knows what FAFO
Yep.
means, right? Yeah, he's FA. I'm find out.
Well, I like it. I like it. Now tell me about your name, Volatile. Where did that come?
Oh, you asked me earlier if what my first name was when I started wrestling,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and that was well, I didn't tack on the moniker Innovator of Impact until a little bit later when I was trying to do some really impactful moves in a very innovative way. So it just and I stole it from Tommy Dreamer, Innovator of Violence. So Innovator of Impact, Wild Child was my original name. My first name was just Wild Child, and the character that I saw in my mind was I don't know if you remember the X-Men Age of Apocalypse when they kind of redid it and Sabretooth was a hero,
Right.
and he had like this little dog creature. It was a man, except he would jump up on Sabretooth's shoulder and he had a
Right.
collar and a chain. His name was Wild Child. So I kind of stole it from that, but I spelled it differently, and Wild Child was my name, and then I tacked on Innovator of Impact Wild Child until I got too many gray to call myself Child anymore. And then I kicked it over to Volatile Curtis Wylde because, much like you, I did have a short temper and I was easily set off. I was very volatile in real life.
Right.
So the best gimmicks are your real life turned up to 11.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what I channeled with that. However, as I've had kids and gotten a little older, like we talked about before the
Yep.
interview started, you start thinking about bail money before you start thinking about revenge.
Yep. That's true. Now,
Because you can make a
so
stupid decision that's going to take food off your table. That's gonna take money out of your.
absolutely, absolutely. So you're this tag team. You're the champ. Been a champ for almost a year. What was the issue with the gentleman that you're facing on the 12th? Why did he decide that he was coming after you guys? I mean, he cut your partner's hair, he cut your hair.
Honestly, I don't think it was a plan. I think the dude is just a scummy opportunist that saw the opportunity to cut Billy's hair in the moment when I wasn't out there. And then when they cut my hair, it took three of them to hold me down. And then it took another one to cut my hair. And Billy McNeil was handcuffed to the top rope, so he wasn't able to get to me. And really, I think they were about to cut his hair again. I just came out to prevent that from happening. I unfortunately brought one of my tag belts out with me, and when I wasn't looking, they got the tag belt. They caught me across the forehead with the tag belt, and then some guys held me down while Glenn cowardly cut my hair. And titles aside, man, July 12th, I'm gonna get revenge. I want the audience to think about it. You get 3, 4 guys to hold you down and cut your hair against your will. How are you gonna feel? What kind of revenge are you gonna want to have? What kind of retribution are you gonna want? Because what you're experiencing right now, what you're thinking you're gonna want, that's what I'm going to get times 10. July 12th, SICW, Collinsville, Illinois. Glen Williams is going to step on through to the wild side. And son, there is absolutely nothing you can do to prevent me from taking that championship.
Well, I was just going to ask you if you want to take the next however long it takes you. Is there a personal message that
And
you
I
would
just
like to
told it.
send
I
out?
just told it. And I'm going to let my actions speak louder than my words. You can check it all out at sicw.org. You can find out exactly why Glen Williams is the piece of garbage that he is, and exactly why on July 12th, Curtis Wylde is going to do what everybody in SICW wants done. I'm going to take the garbage out. So Glen Williams, you can mouth off. He's faking an injury. He hurt his groin. He says. He said his balls are too big, and so he had to go to the hospital, get it checked out. I looked into it, and he has no balls. So now we realize that he's faking this injury. He's just trying to get out of the match July 12th, and it's not going to happen, man. There is nothing he can do to prevent this from happening. So he can beg, borrow, plead. He can pray. He can say his prayers and eat his vitamins. But on July 12th, he's going to step into the square circle with Curtis Wylde. He's going to step in there with the Lion of the Lou, the Wolf of West County, the Spark of Forest Park. He's going to go one-on-one with the Wild One, and he is going to realize what the wild side is all about, and he is going to realize that in the deep water, he can't swim.
There you go, Glen Williams, man. I think you could be in trouble. I think my man here, I believe in him. I think he's going to definitely take that title from you. Again, everybody, July 12th is going to be at the Firemens Hall. If you're able to get tickets, I would highly suggest you guys check this match out. And the rest of SICW. This sounds like this is going to be a very violent match. And again, if I was a betting man, I put my money on Curtis Wylde, man.
I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. And you mentioned another thing that is really important about this. This match isn't happening just anywhere. This isn't just your normal independent wrestling organization. This is SICW. This is the next iteration, the carry on of Wrestling at the Chase. It went from Sam Munchnick to Larry Madison to Herb Simmons, and now here we are, July 12th, in the main event against Glen Williams in Collinsville, Illinois. SICW, as you know, is one of the most respected,
Yep.
longest running wrestling organizations in this country. So this just isn't any match. Just the fact of where it's happening makes it a bigger deal than anywhere else. So July 12th, Glen Williams, Little Nasty, is going to go one-on-one with Volatile Curtis Wylde with Wildfire by my side. And I am going to be the next Central States champion in front of SICW and the wrestling world combined. KG, thank you for having me on, man. July 12th, I hope you're paying attention. I hope you're looking for the results because things are going to get wild. July 12th in SICW. You check it out at sicw.org.
Nothing else needs to be said, guys. Tonight at 6 p.m., we're going to be doing the recap of SmackDown last night. Myself, Kurt, Mark, we will be here. Please subscribe to my podcast. And again, guys, SICW, July 12th, Fireman Hall, Curtis Wylde, going for gold. You guys have a great Saturday.
Thanks for having me.